What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we got a big show tonight. Couple news to get to right before we get started, but we have a segment back, called Who's Back. It was a segment we did last year, and it will be a regular every offseason right here on the Extra Point, and we'll get into all that in just a few minutes. But Daniel, good to see you. Let us know what we got to do on social, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, all of it.
Oh yeah, the moment you've all been waiting for. No, we obviously just started the YouTube channel. We'd love for you guys to follow us there, subscribe, hit the notifications bar. Best way to get there is in a show description on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Just click it there. Obviously, follow us on social, on Instagram and Facebook at the Extra Point Pod. That's going to help us out. All of our links are in the link tree there. And then something we're trying to do is get some mailbag questions up. So the best way to do that, give us a 5-star review. Shout out to our boy Preston, who already left us one. It definitely helps out, and we're going to get that. That is on the horizon. I think later this month. I say later this month. We're recording at the end of February right now. This will be posted March. Okay. At the end of March, I think we're going to have our mailbag podcast. So, keep an eye out for that. But if you want your question answered or your topic brought up, put it on there. Even if it's hate towards another team, we embrace hate so long as it's within the confines of rivalry in college football. That's what it's all about. That's good hate. All right. So do it. And that'll help us out. That'll help us get more recommended. And, we'll be able to do this for a lot longer, probably forever. We'll never stop.
And we already have, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it now. We've got 4 questions that I have kept track of. They are in a note on my phone. So we see them. We see them in Apple Podcasts. Please give us the questions. We want to answer them. And if we get enough questions, if we get enough good questions that require depth of answers, this could be a couple podcasts. So we will do the mailbag so long as we have mailbag questions. So if that's every week, my goodness, we'll do it every week. But as of right now, we're dedicating an episode to it. Would love to do a few episodes though. So let us know what questions you got. We'll be happy to answer them here on the show. Big news today. We're recording this Sunday night, February 28th. Tyrique Gilbert announces on Twitter he is decommitting from the University of Florida. He is opening up his recruitment, and he will not announce what school he's at until he's enrolled at that university. So it looks like this one is a long way from being over. Probably won't know this one until June at the earliest, unless something leaks out.
Yep.
But Daniel, what does this mean for Florida? And what do you think are some potential landing spots for Tyrique Gilbert?
Yeah, so first with Florida, I do think that this impacts them heavily. Usually if it's just a transfer, most of the time it's not a big deal. Florida has been banking on these transfers to provide big time boost to their, to their depth chart. Like they are on, they're on the field. So this is big news because they haven't really recruited at an elite level from high school. So they've been doing a lot of this transfer stuff. Kyle Pitts is out. It was looking perfect to just plug Tyrique Gilbert into that role. It was going to be a new quarterback, but honestly, the biggest weapon on this team was going to be Tyrique Gilbert. Anyways, it's Tyrique Gilbert. All right. It's so tempting to say Tyrique, but anyways, Florida, I think that it's a huge blow because it's potentially your best player on your team not going to be there. So I know that they never had him to lose him, but now this just makes that Pitts loss even greater and that Pitts size hole in the offense huge. As for potential landing spots, his finalists were Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama outside of LSU. He had initially said when he was transferring they wanted to come back home. The closest proximity would be University of Georgia, but Alabama is much closer than LSU to home, and obviously he had committed to Florida. So if that's kind of the distance we're working with, all of those are within striking distance. And someone that recruited him, but Dabo kind of has his process with how he recruits. He's very above board. If anyone's clean in the recruiting game, it's Dabo. So that's someone I would keep an eye on. I haven't heard anything, I haven't read anything, but I could just envision him in that offense being explosive. And you talk about being close to home, Clemson's not too far either. So, they that could be something there. But I think the two teams right now, if you had to handicap it, it'd be Georgia and Alabama probably have the greatest shot to land him.
It'd be just like Alabama to just grab Eric Gilbert, wouldn't
Right.
it?
After the greatest class in the history of anybody, they beat themselves for the greatest class, and then bring in a guy who they missed on a couple years ago. That'd be ultimate. So, I mean, and
And
we'll see what happens.
Nick Saban's always good about. I don't know how he figures out scholarship numbers, but somehow he ends up getting to 85 by the start of the season.
Right.
If they go out and get Henry To'oTo'o and Eric Gilbert in the transfer portal after signing
Right.
the number one class of all time, I mean, the rich get richer, and Nick Saban honestly is doing the best he's ever done in his career. Anyway, but
Well, one
I'm
final thing I'll say, sorry to cut you off. Tennessee being in that final bit, obviously we know that they have a lot of clout around them. Like what's going on? This cloud is hanging over them for what the sanctions may or may not be, them firing all these coaches. If it's not too crazy, that's still a potential landing spot because his high school quarterback, Harrison Bailey, is at Tennessee. They've got an offensive coach. So it is closer to home than LSU was. So I would hate to discount them if we get news on what is going on at Tennessee before this summer. You could see some move be made, but I would still put that one on the back burner.
Florida loses him, big loss for Florida. Like you said, to be counting on these guys in the transfer portal and to lose them, big deal. And some schools still going to get a really good player in Eric Gilbert. You're talking, one of the top ranked players coming out of high school, was the top transfer available this year. So some schools going to get a gem in Eric Gilbert. And, from how it looks like Alabama and Georgia would be top two landing spots, but who knows? He might just decide that, hey, I'm okay being away from home now and go to Ohio State. Just there's no rumors there. Just throwing out a team.
Yeah, no, I mean,
But hey, the other big news, we had some recruiting stuff this week. There's a lot that we'll have to do a recruiting wrap up here in a couple weeks because a lot of movement in the 2022 class. But big news coming out of Clemson, and that's their top corner from this past season, Darion Kendrick. It's confirmed that he is no longer with the team. He's been dismissed from the team. So
right.
won't go into details as far as why he's dismissed and all that kind of stuff, because probably some personal off the field stuff for him. But bottom line for Clemson, you just lost your best defensive back. Now, I think that for Clemson, that's all right considering everything else you get back on defense.
Yeah, this is now 10 out of 11 returning instead of 11 out of 11. So,
and this was, and outside of that, number 3 in returning production on defense, Clemson was. But losing a defensive back is huge. The biggest position in that calculation for returning production is defensive back. And so just because of the style of offense people are playing now, they're playing the most, they're getting a lot more tackles. Whereas, even 5 years ago, linebackers were getting more tackles. Now defensive backs are getting more tackles. It's big loss for Clemson. And so, they've recruited well at the cornerback position, but now you're going to have to rely on someone younger. And luckily this happened before spring, so you can start to get those reps in with those younger guys.
Especially when they come out of the gate playing someone like Georgia. So they don't get to start out with, Charleston Southern or, the Citadel. They're playing, a major opponent, a rival right out of the gate. So it will be tough, but like we said before, luckily they do have all those other areas returning and they have the whole spring to kind of get that figured out.
Absolutely. Well, hey, we're excited for this segment. We did it last year. Who's back? So this idea started with, we always hear it's mainly around Texas, right? So everyone wonders when is Texas going to be back? Is every time Texas is a big win since 2005, it's been, is Texas back? And then Sam Ehlinger, after beating Georgia in the 2018 Sugar Bowl, grabs the mic, says we're back. And it's just, it's always a word surrounding Texas is back. Right.
Right.
So we went through some teams and said, all right, what other teams are always being talked about with being, are they back?
When are they going to be back? Is this team going to be back? And so it's like, you got to quantify a few things. Is it back to what? And so, yeah, like you said, like Miami, I feel like that's always, is Miami back? Are they back? Are they back? And it's like, well, I don't know. Are they going to win 6 championships out of 7 years or whatever it was? Something 5 out of 7. It was crazy. So yeah,
we got 8 teams, and the one quantifier for the requirement to be on this list was past national champion, hasn't won it in the last decade. And this was as of last year. So as of 2010 and beyond, these teams have not won a national title. And for most of the teams, it's well before that, because originally we had a bigger list. Florida was on this list originally. So that's why we said decade, because they had won that 08 title. But Florida's not on the list because Florida is pretty good consistently. So here we go.
And we tried to just represent each, like, yeah, there's some multiple ones from certain conferences, but for the most part, we spread the wealth across the nation. It's not just like 4 SEC schools or 3 Big Ten schools or anything like that. So,
and it's all Power 5 schools represented,
right,
including the independent. So,
yep,
we're gonna go through. We're gonna rank the backness of the following teams. All right.
Who's
so
back?
Daniel and I each have our ranking, and we're going to rank the backness of these teams. So here's our teams. All right. Out of the SEC, we've got Tennessee. So Tennessee, national champions in 1998. A lot of history around the program, a lot of money around the program, big fan base. So Tennessee, definitely in this, are they back, category. Out of the ACC, we've got Miami. So Daniel mentioned Miami, won a bunch of national titles, were super competitive in those early 2000s, in the 1980s. I mean, that for 2 decades, Miami was really good, right?
Yeah.
Out of the Big 12, obviously Texas. I mean, duh, with Texas. And then Big 10, we've got 2 teams, Michigan and Penn State. So 2 college football blue bloods. So we'll rank those as well. Independent Notre Dame. And then last but not least, out of the Pac-12, the Trojans, my hashtag playoff Trojans. So we're going to rank those.
You missed Nebraska.
I'm so
they
sorry.
Are out of the Big 10.
Big 10. That's
but they're
right.
historically in the Big 12.
Right.
So, I know that I said we didn't have 3 from one conference. We do have 3 from the Big 10, but to be fair, Nebraska historically Big 12.
That's accurate. So those are our teams. Let's rank them. So we'll start at the top. We'll go down. Daniel, I think number 1 is the easiest. I think we've got the same number 1 here. As far as who is most back, it's got to be Notre Dame.
Yep,
right?
That's who I have. So
all right, give me why is Notre Dame the most back?
So I love this question for this reason. The casual fan or just the rabid SEC fan who has been taught their whole life to hate Notre Dame would tell you, no, they're not back. They're never going to be back. And what's in their mind is probably, that build up to the 2012 year. And they weren't back then, but they made it to a national championship. And obviously they got blown out. But before that, they had a, decade and a half or so of irrelevance where they just had some wrong coaching hires. And then basically Brian Kelly has stabilized this program. He got them going the right direction. Obviously he took them to that national championship. And then now he's taken them to, what is it, 2 now college football playoff appearances.
That's right.
An ACC championship game. No other Notre Dame coach has ever taken his team to an ACC championship game ever. So, but I mean, beating Clemson on the major stage last year, there's just a lot. He's upgraded the recruiting profile, back to what it used to be, where it's that national brand and they're pulling players from everywhere. And it's an honor to go to Notre Dame. It's not just, oh yeah, I guess I'll go to Notre Dame or whatever. And it's not that, just Big Ten country. They're taking players from everywhere. So I think that it kind of encompasses everything. You've got to be recruiting on a national level as far as competitiveness and playing against, competitively against national teams. So their competition isn't, yearly that they play, USC and Michigan and these rivalries they play every year. Navy, that's not their rival. Their rivals are Clemson and Alabama and the teams that they're trying to knock off to be a champion.
Notre Dame is definitely the most back, right? And no, they haven't won a national championship. No one on this list has in the last decade. So they're most back. I broke it down into three main areas for all these. So recent success, recruiting, and like current and future outlook, right? So recent success. They've been in the college football playoff 2 of the last 3 seasons. Boom.
Yeah.
There you go. They got over the hump and beat Clemson last year. Like, best game of the season. Yes, it was at home. Yes, they lost the rematch, but they beat Clemson at the time. That's huge because you can call recruits on Sunday and say, hey, you turned on SportsCenter. You see what we did last night?
Right.
Huge for recruiting, especially for Notre Dame that's, like you said, trying to recruit on a national level like Clemson, like Alabama, like Georgia. So, and like recruiting, they signed a top 10 class this past season. And recently they've signed 2 top 10 classes in the last 4 years. And the other 2 are top 15 classes. So they're recruiting at a really great level. They went to the ACC championship. Current and future outlook, I really do think they're a QB away from being a championship contender. Right. They've been a playoff contender. They are a playoff contender currently, like current state of the program, playoff contender. I think they're a quarterback away, as are a lot of schools. And they signed Tyler Buckner this year as a 4-star quarterback. He could be that guy that's the next elite quarterback in Notre Dame. So they're number 1. I don't think it's close on this list as to who does number 1. So I had like number 1, pretty big gap. I've got a cluster 2 through 6 that I had to really figure out. And then 7 and 8 were pretty easy for me. But Daniel, I'd love to hear your number 2. Really curious.
Well, this is tough because like you said, it's a cluster and it's going to be kind of what you value the most. So for me, I really like current state of the program and kind of their future outlook. So I'm going with Miami. I like Miami. I think that the past, when Mark Richt went down there, it kind of showed, kind of revamped them a little bit. And then they kind of came back to earth a little bit. And then Manny Diaz comes in. That first year wasn't great. And then this year, I feel like they had a really strong showing. So 8 or 9 wins this year in the COVID year. And they just, getting Tyrique King was huge. Recruiting, they had to kind of up their profile again because, people know the password to getting into South Florida and coming and taking players. So it's important for them to keep some guys home. And Josh Pate has talked about this a lot as far as the transfer portal. This is going to be in Miami's favor going forward. And so I think that, as far as kids wanting to come back home, things like that, perfect example, Tyrique Stevens in this offseason, 5-star defensive back, plays a couple years at Georgia, is coming home to Miami where he never really wanted to leave initially. They just didn't have, I guess, that program ready for him. And now, look, they're probably going to contend for an ACC championship this year. They're definitely top 2 in the Coastal between them and North Carolina. So I really feel good with them. And, I think that I agree with you. I think there's a big gap between number 1 and number 2. So I'm not saying that they're as close to being back, and this kind of thing, but I feel really good about them against the rest of this list. Future, I like them this year. They're going to beat Alabama that first game. I'm just kidding. But the recruiting, all this kind of stuff. Their roster is really strong, and I could see them in the next 2 years knocking off Clemson. That's where I'm at. Not knocking them off long term. I'm talking about beating them in one game. I think they can do it.
I've got Miami at 3. So I'll give you my Miami thoughts, and I'll tell you why they're below my number 2 team. So
I know who your number 2 team is.
yeah, it's my playoff Trojans.
I can
obviously.
smell it. Yeah.
Obviously. So Miami, yeah, they're playing winning football. So they went 8-3 this past season. Like you said, they're consistently. I just think like brand wise, they're consistently playing winning football,
Right.
which is step one in being back. Like just start playing winning football, winning most of your games.
That's a precursor to the rest of this list,
right? So, and what they haven't done what Notre Dame's done, which is get over the hump and upset a team, go win a big game. They're still getting beat by teams that should beat them.
Yeah.
So they haven't upset anybody since, Mark Richt's first year when they beat Notre Dame. Like that was like the last time when it was like big win for Miami.
It was a shock, right?
Right. So, I mean, Clemson, perfect example this year. I think that score is 41-17, just like bloodbath, beat down. And then 2, they haven't been able to avoid the bad upset either. And so it's like, that's the next step is, okay, you're winning most of your games. Now, step 1, beat every team you should. Don't let a Georgia Tech come in there and beat you, right. Especially if you want to contend for the Coastal this year, which, you and I both think they're very capable of winning the Coastal this year. Avoid that bad upset. Put yourself in the position to compete in those big games. Getting beat 41-17, you're not competing in that game. Put yourself in position to win the big game. Recruiting, they've recruited very well.
Right.
So top 15 class this year, they ranked 12th. Manny Diaz's first year, they were 27th. Year before that, they were at 18. So going up every year, they will be a transfer destination at Miami. So that will help, but they got to start recruiting these guys out of high school, keeping them home. Current state, they will compete for the ACC Coastal this year. They will be one of those top 2 teams that will compete for it. And I think they're potentially going to compete for an ACC championship this year, given that Derek King is healthy and that he can play a full season and play at full strength. I think that they, again, can put themselves in position to compete with Clemson, to be on the same field as Clemson, because this past season they were not on the same field as Clemson. So Miami's doing great. They're my number 3 team. I've got USC as number 2. So recruiting. They've out-recruited Miami 3 out of the last 4 seasons. Now, the one season they didn't was a really bad year for recruiting for USC. They have won their division, which Miami has not done, 3 times in the last 6 years. So they won the division. And for comparison's sake, it's like the bad division in the conference for both of them. So the ACC Coastal and the Pac-12 South are the least competitive of the conference. They won their conference in 2017. They play for their conference championship this year. They got the advantage of playing on a short week against a team coming off of a bye. So
you can gripe all you want.
It is what it is. It was 2020. But in current outlook, they should be one of the 2 teams that should be favored to win the Pac-12 this year. I am leaning them over Oregon simply based on quarterback consistency. We don't know what we're going to get out of Oregon yet. That's my February 28th lean.
Yeah.
So things are looking good for USC. That's why I had them above Miami. But again, that was the first hard decision for me, was 2 and 3. And so I think those are the same tier is how I had it on mine. It's like tier 1 Notre Dame, tier 2 USC and Miami.
I agree. I mean, I have USC's number 3. And like I said, the deciding factor between the 2 is current and future outlook. I would say current outlook, you could argue USC is in a better position. They're close, I would say, because they're both contending for their division. And then, USC probably has the upper hand with the upside of potentially winning their conference. Whereas Miami, you got to climb the Clemson hill, so that's going to be a little bit different. So I understand that. I guess for me, future going forward, Keaton Slovis goes pro after this year, then I'm not as confident in Jackson Dart and the QBs that have come in, and I don't know that Clay Helton can bring them back to where they want to be. I think that he can make them continue to keep them as a winning program. I do think that Manny Diaz has the pedigree to bring Miami back to where they want to be. So I think I'm kind of clipping the wings. I think that Clay Helton's more clipping the wings, and so that's why it was a little different for me. But look, I agree. They're both in that same realm, and I like USC. I mean, they're my third team. They're better than these other teams on here. They've been winning. They've been recruiting. And I mean, Keaton Slovis, he's going to be probably one of the top quarterbacks taken next year in the draft. He's going to be one of the top ones talked about this year as far as stats go. He's going to have a full season instead of being in this crazy Pac-12 where they only played like 4.5 games each. So I'm excited to see him with another full season as the guy, and he's been developing.
So I have a question for you whenever we get to another team on this list,
Okay.
because I want to compare two coaches. All right.
Oh,
Clay
yeah.
Helton being one of them.
All right.
Do you know what season he is as head coach of USC?
Probably season 6 or 7.
And like it's just like and he's been there since like 2011 on staff. So
Right.
dude, he's just been at USC forever. Anyway, so I'll bring up a question about Clay Helton with another coach here in a little bit. All right, number 4. Go ahead and hit me with your number 4, Daniel.
Penn State. So
all right. I've
my
also got Penn State number 4.
biggest issue, I'll start with my issue because I think otherwise they're a great program. My biggest issue is last season should never happen with the type of talent they have, with the type of skill that they have. They've recruited above what they did last year. Now, am I willing to throw it out because last year was crazy for everyone on planet Earth? Yes. But that's a major issue, and it takes me away from the issue that we were trying to discuss with them last year going into the year. Can they take the next step and be an elite team? What's holding them back? And it was the quarterback position. Sean Clifford, we know the name. He's been there. He's playing competent starter football in the Big Ten, but he's not playing can take you to a Big Ten championship, can knock off a Ohio State, can consistently keep you at that elite level where even if you lose to Ohio State, you get an at-large bid. He's still not there. They needed, Justin Fields when he had originally committed them. They needed someone like that. So a lot of these schools are quarterback away. The transfer market will one day probably be in their favor. But I think overall as a program, they're a pretty healthy program with how James Franklin has positioned them. If you look at the last 5 years with the winning and all this, winning 10, 11 games a year. So I like Penn State to rebound in a major way this year. But that's me keeping them at 4. I was keeping, throwing some water on that fire.
Penn State has won the Big Ten in the last 5 years. So, yeah, recency, they're sitting in a good spot. Yes, 2020 should never happen. I'm willing to give them a pass because of A, how the Big Ten handled COVID, B, their top 3 players opted out. Like on their roster, best 3 players opted out of the season. So I'm willing to give 2020 a pass, but they have to have an immediate bounce back year this year.
Right.
Like 9-3 should be the floor for Penn State every year.
I'm honestly at 10-2 with them this year. I think with what they've got set, like the 2 potential, I mean, we'll see. But yeah, 9-3 floor, I'm good with that. But
recruiting, they've recruited decently. Top 25 every year, top 15 the previous 2 before this year. Yeah, they're a quarterback away. They have a guy who is they got him the year after Sean Clifford. Clearly, he's not as good as Clifford because he hasn't ever taken him, but they haven't taken a good quarterback in the past 2 classes. They had a 4-star kid last year, but a low-rated 4-star, 3-star kid this year. So they haven't taken an elite quarterback. they got to get one in the 2022 class, and the 2022 class is a great quarterback class. So you got to go get one of these dudes to replace Clifford. Because yeah, I think you're looking at, I mean, a 10-2 Penn State from here on out, like if they're a quarterback away. And so then you're talking, I mean, what's the difference in them and Michigan at that point?
Yeah.
Like it's just Ohio State and everybody else. It already is, but it will become a lot more apparent. I got Michigan at 5. And I'll say this as I'm saying this, I have Michigan / Texas at 5 and 6. And I will stick. No, you know what? No, Texas at 5. That's final answer. Texas.
That's who I have. I have Texas at 5 as well.
Okay. So Texas played for a Big 12 championship 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what decided it for me. They played for a Big 12 championship 2 years ago. They've recruited at an elite level, at a top 5 level, not just top 15, whatever. So they fired their head coach. So that was why, if I'm talking, I was almost comparing program like stability, I think, when I was putting Michigan ahead. But they fired their head coach, but the cupboard's not empty. Like it is stocked with talent.
They fired him because they were sick of underachieving.
Right.
And Michigan didn't fire their coach, and it's almost like they're okay with the level of production level. Like it's just it's two different mindsets. Like they're both recruiting similarly, but Texas is recruiting like at an elite level, like you said, and then compared to their rival. So Texas versus Oklahoma, Texas has beaten Oklahoma in recruiting, several years. That they go back and forth, but there's no question Ohio State is light years ahead of Michigan in recruiting. So that, and then, yeah, like you said, the coach, it's just like Tom Herman he's fine. Like he wasn't great. He had some games where he looked great. Sometimes he didn't. Their offense was finally scoring a bunch of points, but what does it matter? They weren't winning what they should have, what they thought they should have. So, I mean, if they're discontent enough as a organization and as a fan base to go and try to get the guy, I'm here for it.
So Texas at 5, Michigan at 6. Michigan hasn't won their division in a long time. They haven't gotten over the hump of Ohio State since Jim Harbaugh got there. They're recruiting at a decent level. They're not recruiting poorly, but again, if the comparison is Ohio State, then you are recruiting pretty poorly. But so is everyone else, to be fair. Right. And then, I mean, they have to have a good season this season. I think they're capable. There's rumors that J.J. McCarthy's like the guy, that dude at quarterback. So 5-star quarterback coming in for Michigan, could start as a true freshman.
Heard the same thing about Shea Patterson.
You're right. So, I mean, got to go 10-2. Like for me, Michigan, the floor is 10-2 this year. They just extended Jim Harbaugh. So this brings me to my question. You are, D-Ham you have to hire one of these two coaches. Who are you hiring, Clay Helton or Jim Harbaugh? They've both met their schools in 2015. I'll say Clay Helton's won a conference championship in the Pac-12. They don't have an Ohio State in their
conference am I in? The SEC.
The Big 12. That's what you're in the Big 12.
I probably would just go economic on it and take Clay Helton because he's going to be cheaper than paying for the same result, paying more to Jim Harbaugh. Because then the buyout will be cheaper when I fire him after a couple of years.
So who's doing the better job at their school, Jim Harbaugh or Clay Helton?
I mean, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I'm glad you posed it. But I mean, if all is equal, I mean, conference championship and recruiting is better at USC for Clay Helton. So I would probably go Clay Helton over Jim Harbaugh.
I'm going to throw this on Twitter. I'm going to throw a poll, maybe on Instagram too. Who is doing a better job as a head coach at their respective schools, Jim Harbaugh or Clay Helton. I just think there's not two similar coaches, like similar situations, both out of blue blood, got hired the same year, have kind of underachieved.
But the expectations were different. That's the only thing. It's like Harbaugh came in with some fanfare, and Helton was kind of just like, "Hey, do you want this job? You kind of figure it out." And then they
That's
went
why,
from there.
I don't think Harbaugh is objectively a bad coach. I think he's a good football coach. I just don't think he is an elite football coach. And I think Michigan wants
Which is
an
what he's
elite
paid to
football
do.
coach. Right. And I also think the college football culture has shifted where 10-2 is not a good season anymore. Like he could go 10-2 every year for the rest of his career and people would be unhappy. It's like Mark Richt at Georgia, you know? So anyway, whole other subject. We both got Texas, then Michigan at 5-6. 7 and 8, I imagine we also have the same.
I
I've
think
got
so.
Nebraska, then Tennessee.
That's the same too for me.
So, all right, Nebraska.
So legit, our only difference on this was Miami and USC, and we had them 2-3.
Makes sense.
Yeah, at least we weren't exactly the same.
Right? Hit me with Nebraska.
I mean, they're not as bad as Tennessee. Other than that, I think that they are kind of clinging to hope. They're clinging to hope right now that Scott Frost can just turn it around. He's had extra slack because of being, a quarterback on a national championship team there. So I don't have a whole lot of faith, but they've been more stable in the sense that they haven't had some insane coaching search twice in the past 5 years. So I'll give them credit for that. The patience, I do think, is a good thing. Stability of a program. I know we're, mostly joking, but I do think that that's important, that they can give him this chance to turn it around. I don't know how much chance I don't know what my hopes are for Nebraska. I think I just was so turned off when everybody said it was their year a couple years ago, and then they just got their teeth kicked in, and I just kind of laughed at it because they hadn't done anything to earn that, in my opinion. I know that they had a good finish to the 2018 year, so everybody's saying, "Oh, 2019, they're going to do it." But I mean, in their own division, Wisconsin and Iowa are just too consistent for someone like Nebraska in their current state to just get a seat at the table after 1 year. So they've got to really.
That was straight disrespectful to the two-time Big Ten West champion Northwestern Wildcats. If you're talking about consistency, 2 out of the last 3 seasons.
The fighting Reese Davises. Yeah. Talk about consistency. What was in between those 2 seasons? It was the worst offensive performance ever. It was so bad. It's like they finally got a 5-star at quarterback and didn't know what to do with him. They're like, we don't do this very often. I don't know what to do with my hands. So yeah. Northwestern, yeah, fine. Them too. So if Northwestern has a seat at the table and Wisconsin has a seat at the table and Iowa has a seat at the table and PJ Fleck is banging on the table, then I don't know what Nebraska is expecting to do. Are they wanting to be in the top 3? Is that their goal? Be in the top 3 of their division and win 8 games a year? I don't know. I think that, we talked about the top of this list, the, 1 through 4, all of those teams are winning football right now, notwithstanding Penn State that 1 year last year, but in general, playing winning football, that's Nebraska's next step. They need to just get to where they can play winning football, making bowl games consistently, not worried about it, and taking positive steps forward and not taking steps back. So that's really their next step. And then as far as Tennessee goes, or I guess you want to talk on Nebraska first.
Well, here's what's funny. Nebraska and Tennessee. The battle of the former UCF head coaches.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So, number one, if you're comparing Nebraska and Tennessee and comparing which coach looked better as a hire coming out of UCF, which one's better, Scott Frost
Scott
or Josh
Frost.
Heupel?
Scott Frost is
Scott
leaving the
Frost.
mountaintop. Yeah, it's easy.
So, like, even if you're talking head coach hires, Tennessee got Scott Frost's replacement. And if you talk to Tennessee fans, they think that Nebraska is here and Tennessee is here as a program. But you're talking about two programs that won national championships in the 1990s. Now, Nebraska won several, Tennessee won one. Both had like College Football Hall of Fame, and Tennessee had Peyton Manning, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, Tom Osborne, one of the greatest college quarterbacks of all time. So very similar in like some deep rooted history.
Right.
Incredible fan bases, incredible huge stadiums.
Look, Nebraska, corn huskers, right? They're all about corn out there. Tennessee, moonshine. All right. So they've got similar, it's just liquid
That's
corn.
right.
So I think
yeah,
that's how it's made.
Nebraska, I mean, I think if you're a Nebraska fan, you have to ask yourself, like, what should our expectations be? What are relevant and ESRC, what do we have the resources to do? What do we have the skills to do? Like, what is our expectation? Right. So for Nebraska, like you said, like, I think every 3 years they have the ability to win the Big Ten West. I think that is their ceiling, is like every 3 years winning the Big Ten West. But like you said, they gotta start playing winning football. I'm with you. You and I were both super turned off with year one Scott Frost, Big Ten West favorites. Like, the media picked them to win the Big Ten West. Hilarious. So they got to start playing winning football. Last but not least, Tennessee. Only thing Tennessee has above Nebraska, they've recruited better, but they just fired 10 coaches because apparently they weren't doing it the right way.
Coaching search U is what Tennessee is. So I just don't, I hate to be like piling on and say, oh, they're, a dumpster fire or something like this, but it's a list of 8 teams and they're number 8. All right. So I hope for their sake that Heupel is that program stabilizer, because like these lower half teams, specifically 7 and 8 they need to play winning football. The best way to do that is to raise your floor and develop quarterbacks. So maybe that's what Josh Heupel can do for them. I unfortunately am at a place where I have to see it to believe it. I can no longer buy any more hype after them coming into last season talking about an SEC winning streak and then, getting blown up, by Georgia. And then at that point, it just all downhill from there. So I don't think I can take any build up or hype or anything like this. The recruiting has been there. The players are there. Basically, I need to see them put, at least half a season of complete games together of, hey, they might be playing winning football. It can't be one game, they come out the gate hot, or 2 games even. It's got to be like a consistent show of this is what their offense is now. This is what their expectation is on the field.
I mean, Tennessee, like you said, not trying to pile on, but of these 8 teams, 2 coaching searches in the last 4 years. Now you've got like recruiting allegations enough there to fire 10 coaches with cause. So there's more coming. The NCAA doesn't just let that slide. Like,
right,
hey, you fired the guys and now you're good. There'll be some scholarship reductions. I'm sure there will be, not that this matters, some wins vacated. Who cares about previous ones being vacated? That's a dumb penalty in my opinion. Anyway, but then I think like current state, the recruiting wasn't bad, but you had a mass exodus of transfers this past season after Pruitt left. And then I'm with you. I need to see it to believe it. They have to change their brand of football. This is not like Sark coming in and like, we just got to fine tune a couple things. And this is a machine. They have to scrape and rebuild, like knock it down, put a new foundation on, and start over as a football
brick by
program.
brick.
Brick by brick. So, for Tennessee's sake, I hope it's Heupel. If not, maybe Heupel can lay a great foundation for the next coach to come in and build the house on top of it. So Tennessee, step one, like go win 3 SEC games this year. I think that would be huge. You go 3-5 in the SEC.
And be competitive in the other ones.
Be competitive in the other ones. You can go to a bowl game if you go 3-5 in the SEC. So that's where I'm at with Tennessee. They're number 8 on this list. So to recap, you and I both have Notre Dame at 1. Only difference on this list, I've got USC at 2, you got Miami at 2, and then the other one at 3. And then at 4, Penn State, 5, Texas, 6, Michigan, 7, Nebraska, 8, Tennessee. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. I'm going to throw that poll out there tonight. So if you're listening to this on Monday morning, go ahead and go vote. On Twitter, you can follow me at Jacob Carnes with a K. You can follow Daniel at Deep South Daniel on Twitter. Follow us there. And like Daniel mentioned, go throw us a question on a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We're going to throw together a mailbag episode. We want to talk about the content that you want to talk about. So leave us a review. Hey, follow us on social. Give us content, give us feedback there. If you know us personally, you're our friends listening, text us what you want us to talk about. We want to talk about what you want to talk about.
And you can leave a comment on YouTube as well. That's something we didn't mention. So if you leave a comment on YouTube with a question, see if we can respond to that one too.
That will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I'm Jake.